The respiratory system performs several important functions. First and foremost, it functions in the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the air that's in the lungs and the blood that's flowing through the capillaries within the lungs. Oxygen is picked up at the lungs, loaded onto hemoglobin, which is the oxygen-carrying protein that's found in the erythrocytes, and it is then carried to the body's tissues by those erythrocytes. The tissues use the chemical energy in oxygen in order to power their enzymes that make ATP energy. Carbon dioxide, or CO2, is picked up at the tissues, converted into a substance called bicarbonate, which is dissolved in the blood plasma, and then it is carried to the lungs where it is converted back into CO2 and is exhaled. This is the typical process for which CO2 or carbon dioxide is metabolized in the body, but some carbon dioxide is carried as it is in the bloodstream and by hemoglobin as well. Carbon dioxide is created when the chemical energy that's in glucose is metabolized in order to make ATP energy. The carbon in carbon dioxide is the carbon that came from the metabolized glucose. Functionally, bicarbonate is useful as a buffer because it maintains blood pH. Bicarbonate is used by the body to neutralize excess acids or alkaline substances within the blood, which help to prevent large changes in blood pH and blood chemistry. So in addition, certain structures of the respiratory system are functionally used for sensing odors, specifically the sensory structures in the nerves that are within the nose and the nasal cavity. And some of these structures are also used for speech production, such as the nasal sinuses, which are cavities that surround the nasal cavity itself, in addition to the larynx. And we're going to explore those structures further on within later segments of this module. Anatomically, the respiratory system consists of the conducting zone structures and the respiratory zone structures. The conducting zone structures includes the organs that are not involved in gas exchange. Instead, the conducting zone simply moves volumes of air to and from the lungs. These structures include the nose, the pharynx, the larynx, the trachea, and the bronchi. So they function, as I mentioned earlier, as passageways to move air to and from the lungs. They also function in warming and humidifying that incoming air and also to cleanse that air from dust and debris. The respiratory zone structures includes the organs or the structures that are involved in gas exchange between the air and the bloodstream. Primarily, these structures are the microscopic alveoli and their associated capillaries. Figure 22.2 examines some of the major structures that belong to the respiratory system. The nasal cavity functions as the main entrance and exit to the respiratory system. The oral cavity can also function as an air passageway, but it is not considered a strictly respiratory system structure since its main function is primarily with the digestive system. The nasal cavity leads to the pharynx, which is a muscular passageway that's found between the nasal cavity and the larynx. The larynx is a cartilage structure that also functions as the voice box in the production of speech sounds. The larynx leads to the trachea, which is a cartilaginous tube that conducts air to and from the lungs. The trachea branches to become the right and left main bronchi, or bronchus, which is the singular form of the word, and these deliver air to the right and the left lungs, respectively. The hundreds of millions of alveoli that are within the lungs are the gas exchange structures and are much too small to see within this diagram. The diaphragm muscle at the bottom of the diagram is a skeletal muscle that functions to change the volume of the thoracic cavity and the volume of the lungs along with it in order to create the pressure changes that drive airflow into and out of the lungs.